As the United States continues to grapple with the rising influence of Christian nationalism, it is important to recognize that the issue is not simply rhetorical but has real social, cultural, and political implications. The case of the Hanuman statue in Texas exemplifies this dynamic in microcosm. Statues and symbols are never neutral, they convey power, identity, and belonging. For the Indian American community and for Hindus globally, the Statue of Union represented more than a religious icon. It embodied cultural continuity, historical memory, and the effort to establish a visible presence in a society where they are still a minority. The condemnation of the statue as false or un-American by a prominent politician not only challenges the religious freedom guaranteed under the U.S. Constitution, but also signals to minority communities that their cultural practices and symbols are increasingly subject to political contestation. This can have chilling effects on community engagement, public celebration of religious festivals, and even educational outreach that seeks to teach American citizens about the diversity of faiths in the country. Moreover, the controversy surrounding the statue illustrates a broader trend in American politics: the deliberate use of cultural symbols to mobilize voters. By framing non-Christian practices as inherently foreign or un-American, politicians tap into a sense of majority anxiety, portraying themselves as defenders of a threatened national identity. This tactic is effective because it combines elements of cultural nostalgia, religious devotion, and perceived existential threat. It also aligns with a long history in American politics where identity, racial, religious, or ethnic, has been leveraged to galvanize support. In the past, the targets were often racial minorities or immigrants. Today, religious minorities are increasingly implicated. In this context, the Hanuman statue is not just an artistic or devotional project, it becomes a political symbol, a proxy for broader debates about who belongs in the American nation and who does not. The social media landscape amplifies these debates exponentially. Platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and X allow statements like those of Alexander Duncan to reach hundreds of thousands of users instantly, while also enabling rapid mobilization of both support and opposition. The responses to Duncan's tweet illustrate how digital spaces function as arenas for cultural and religious contestation. Supporters often cited biblical passages and emphasized the primacy of Christianity in American life, while opponents criticized the exclusionary rhetoric and defended pluralism. The speed and visibility of social media mean that minority communities are exposed to intense scrutiny, sometimes facing threats and harassment, but it also allows them to organize, educate, and advocate on a national scale. The digital environment, therefore, is both a challenge and an opportunity for those invested in maintaining religious diversity. The Trump administration's broader policies and statements reinforce this trend. Trump's frequent assertion that he is bringing religion back into public life, alongside the creation of the Religious Liberty Commission, signals an institutional commitment to integrating religious considerations into governance. This commission, tasked with evaluating religious freedom issues and making policy recommendations, is positioned to influence federal decision-making on matters ranging from school curricula to public funding for religious organizations. While some supporters frame this as a restoration of traditional values, critics argue it undermines the secular principles enshrined in the Constitution, particularly the prohibition against the establishment of a national religion. The tension between legal safeguards and political rhetoric creates a complex environment where the meaning of religious liberty itself is contested. It raises questions not only about the rights of minority faiths, but also about the interpretation of constitutional principles, the role of the judiciary, and the mechanisms through which public policy is shaped. Examining the demographic context further clarifies why Christian nationalism has traction. Approximately 62% of Americans identify as Christian, encompassing a wide range of denominations including Protestant, Catholic, and evangelical groups. These communities are not monolithic, but collectively they represent a powerful electoral bloc. 7% of Americans adhere to other faiths, Muslims, Hindus, Sikhs, Buddhists, and Jews among them, while roughly 29% are unaffiliated, encompassing atheists, agnostics, and individuals who identify as spiritual but not religious. While the unaffiliated share is growing, it lacks the organizational cohesion and mobilization infrastructure of established religious groups. Political strategists recognize that appealing to the Christian majority is an effective pathway to electoral success. By framing policy, culture, and national identity in explicitly Christian terms, leaders like Trump can energize their base, consolidate support, and position themselves as champions of a threatened majority. This strategic calculus explains why Christian nationalism, despite constitutional constraints, has become increasingly visible in public discourse. The implications for religious minorities are far-reaching. Indian Americans, Muslims, Sikhs, Jews, and other minority groups may face subtle pressures to conform culturally, altering how they practice their faith or present their religious symbols in public spaces. Over time, this can erode the sense of safety and belonging that has been a hallmark of American religious life. Schools may face debates over curricula that include non-Christian religious content, and local governments may encounter disputes over permits for religious festivals or monuments. For families considering immigration, these developments may influence perceptions of opportunity and inclusion. The United States has historically attracted immigrants with the promise of religious freedom and cultural acceptance. A shift toward exclusive nationalism could diminish that appeal, reshaping immigration patterns and the composition of communities. Internationally, these developments resonate as well. America's historical role as a global advocate for human rights and religious freedom is being scrutinized in light of domestic trends. Nations that have been criticized for marginalizing minorities now point to U.S. policies and rhetoric as evidence of hypocrisy. India, for example, has faced extensive international attention regarding the treatment of religious minorities. Yet now Indian leaders and commentators highlight the U.S. situation to underscore that no country, regardless of its democratic traditions, is immune to majoritarian pressures. This global dimension adds another layer of complexity, as U.S. foreign policy and soft power are intertwined with perceptions of domestic governance, cultural pluralism, and the protection of minority rights. Historically, the interplay between religion and politics in the United States has been cyclical. During periods of perceived social change or national stress, appeals to religious identity often intensify. The post-World War II era saw Christianity emphasized as a unifying national value in contrast to atheistic communism, while the 1980s brought the moral majority and evangelical activism to the forefront of political life. In the 21st century, particularly during the Trump era, Christian nationalism has become more explicit and aggressive, targeting not only secular trends but also the presence of non-Christian faiths in public spaces. Unlike past periods, however, this trend operates in a highly interconnected, media-saturated environment, amplifying both support and opposition. Legal protections continue to serve as a critical safeguard. Court decisions uphold the First Amendment, striking down policies that overtly privilege one religion over another. Yet legal rulings alone cannot shape social norms or prevent the dissemination of exclusionary rhetoric. As a result, the lived experience of religious minorities may diverge from the constitutional ideal, particularly in regions where political and cultural attitudes favor Christian nationalism. In these contexts, symbolic actions, statues, public prayers, curriculum choices take on heightened significance, as they communicate societal values and signal which communities are truly considered part of the national fabric. Looking toward the future, several factors will determine the trajectory of religious pluralism in the United States. Demographic trends suggest that younger Americans are less religiously affiliated, potentially creating a counterweight to the political influence of Christian nationalism. Education and civic engagement can reinforce pluralist values, equipping citizens to resist exclusionary narratives. Political leadership is also decisive. Elected officials who emphasize inclusivity, constitutional principles, and respect for minority rights can shape public discourse, while leaders who exploit religious identity for electoral gain may exacerbate divisions. The intersection of social media, demographic change, and political mobilization ensures that the debate over religion in public life will remain highly visible and consequential. Comparative analysis highlights lessons from other nations. India's Hindutva movement, Turkey's gradual re-Islamization under Erdogan, Israel's debates over defining the state as Jewish, and Poland's Catholic nationalist policies all illustrate how religion can become entangled with governance, citizenship, and national identity. Each case demonstrates that when majority religious identity is leveraged for political purposes, the rights and cultural expression of minority groups often come under pressure. The United States, with its history of pluralism and constitutional protections, has structural advantages that make wholesale religious exclusion unlikely. Nonetheless, the rise of Christian nationalism signals that vigilance is necessary to maintain the principles of religious freedom and cultural inclusion. For Indian Americans and other minorities, advocacy and coalition building will be essential. Organizations that defend religious liberty must remain engaged, providing legal support, public education, and community organizing. Cross-faith alliances can strengthen resistance to exclusionary policies and rhetoric, reinforcing the principle that diversity is a source of national strength rather than a threat. At the same time, Public awareness campaigns and civic education can counter misinformation, helping Americans understand the historical and constitutional foundations of pluralism. These efforts are not simply reactive, they represent proactive strategies to ensure that religious identity does not become a barrier to full participation in civic life. In conclusion, the trajectory of Christian nationalism in the United States, exemplified by events such as the Hanuman statue controversy, and supported by high-profile statements from politicians and official government accounts, represents a significant challenge to the nation's historical commitment to pluralism and the separation of church and state. While the constitutional framework, demographic trends, and civic engagement provide mechanisms for safeguarding religious freedom, the social, cultural, and political pressures associated with the movement demand attention. For minority communities, the stakes are high, encompassing not only religious practice but also cultural identity, social belonging, and a sense of security. As America navigates this period of transformation, the balance between majority religious identity and constitutional pluralism will be tested, requiring careful observation, informed debate, and proactive engagement from citizens, leaders, and advocacy groups alike. How the nation responds to these challenges will shape the lived experience of religious minorities, the credibility of U.S. institutions, and the global perception of America as a defender of human rights and religious freedom. The ongoing debates, controversies, and policy initiatives suggest that the next decade will be critical in determining whether the United States can maintain its pluralistic traditions, or whether it will drift toward a model in which national identity is narrowly defined by religion, with implications not only for domestic policy, but for the nation's international standing and moral authority in the world.